Don't just live for tomorrow, or just live in yesterday. Just be glad for all you have that's in today.
Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my blind reaction to Digimon Adventure 2020, episode 33. We are back with another week of Digimon, and right off the bat, you could say, learned something / remembered something here. Millenniumon was actually in Digimon Adventure 2 in the original run of Digimon. I think he was like briefly in it though, only to like pump up another villain or something like that. It evolved from Chimeramon, and it was also used in one of the games. I don't know which one. And I remembered all this thanks to Billiam's podcast, their recap video going over the episodes and all. Because they released another one of those. I didn't watch the entire video yet, but I eventually will. It's so long, and it's almost entirely just them sitting there talking, and it gets kind of boring sometimes. Also, they're getting really negative on it. Like they're really harking on just stupid little things. And maybe it's just because I am enjoying this so much and I am finding it so much better than the original series and shit. But it ends up being like I'm not understanding their points, and it's actually irritating me a little bit. Not just that I don't understand their points, but it's irritating me obviously because at someone who's not only enjoying this immensely, but I don't see where they're coming from at all, and I don't understand. Like, are they watching a different show? It kind of feels like that sometimes, and it's like it's annoying, and I admit it's annoying. And I admit that it's probably just me. That it's just because I do like it so much. So yeah. But we do have big stuff going on. But it's kind of moving along right now at a even pace. We're trying not to rush into things like it did early on as much. It's taking more of its time, and I appreciate that. Because we're getting a lot of big lore drops, a lot of your typical kind of battle of the week stuff going on. um, and I'm still wanting to catch up with some of the other Digidestined too. And I'm gonna keep. I've said before, I'll say it again. I'm gonna keep calling them that just out of habit. Chosen ones, Digidestined, whatever you want to call them. I'm still gonna call them that out of habit from growing up with the dub. Um, but yeah, it's like we still haven't seen what all of them are doing, or we only catch up very briefly with them. Like with Joe, first he's in the hot springs, then the nanny mon come, and now there's a blossomon, and it's like, but we're not actually seeing anything, and there's no actual fight going on. Maybe that's where it's going to head to, where he's going to have to like stand up for himself here and actually fight them. But I don't know. Right now, it's just mostly been Ty and Sora, with a little bit of Izzy kind of in the background as well. And it's just, it's fine, but I want to see everyone else do stuff too. It just seems like everyone else is just kind of taking a back seat these recent episodes since they got separated again, which, like, I understand that Ty is the main character. Like, out of all of them, he is the main character. I get that. And I get wanting to show off more with him and more with the Agumon line and everything. And I can even understand pairing him with Sora, because Sora's always, throughout this series, really, the original adventure and so on and so forth, she's kind of been the main girl, the leading female character kind of opposite to Tai. And one of the reasons why so many people ship them. But it's like, I just feel that I just feel that all these other characters are kind of being left behind because of it. There's a little more with TK like comparatively, but it's just like, I don't know. It's mostly just been these past few episodes because these other characters have gotten plenty of time to shine. But even so, it's like that is one of my complaints on the series compared to Billiam and them. Their complaints that I just do not get and just sound like not even just nitpicks. I just do not understand. Um, One of my complaints is the fact that they focus so heavily on Tai and don't give enough attention to the others. Which, again, I haven't finished watching the newest episode of Billiam's podcast on it, so I don't know if they cover that, but I don't think they have in the past, and this has been an issue pretty much the entire series. So it's like, yeah, they've gotten their moments to shine when we have to introduce their new evolutions, but that's pretty much it. It's like when we're not introducing new evolutions for these characters, they take such a major backseat, and it's like it's really disappointing to me. That's my big complaint because yes, again, Tai is the main character, but we want to see so much more from the others too. It just feels wrong to have so many main characters and only focus on one, maybe two at a time. And it's the same two for pretty much the entire thing. It's just these other characters. It's like the viewers watching, the kids watching, are going to connect with them too. In fact, a lot of kids probably won't connect with Tai as easily. Yeah, some definitely will, but there's a lot who won't. There's a lot who would connect much more easier with Mimi or Izzy or Joe, even to a degree as well, like Matt. And it's like, why aren't we showing more of that? Like, even Matt has taken more of a backseat, which is honestly surprising because he was always kind of the second main character after Tai in the original and everything. And so it's like, it's even wild that he's taken more of a backseat. I mean, he definitely has a bigger impact than the other characters. Um, and it's probably in order the top three who have the most, or the top four, the only four who of the group who really have the most notable time. Tai is definitely number one. Matt is two. I would say Izzy is number three just because he's been in the series longer than TK, and TK is number four. TK has had more screen time recently, but overall, Izzy has had more. And Izzy's role has basically become relegated to, oh, this is what's happening in the real world. This is the weird technological bullshit that's happening in the real world that's connecting to the digital world. How are we going to stop it? That's pretty much all Izzy's role is. And it's all it's been for quite a long time. Like, at least TK has something to do. But, like, the likes of, like, Joe and Mimi and, well, Sora's with Tai right now, so she has kind of a pass just because she's with him. But otherwise, like, even she hasn't been as useful as she could have been, as, like, notable. And it's like, even TK, even Izzy, like, all of them could have just had so much more to do. I really think splitting them up again here was a bad decision. Especially because it's like, especially with them focusing so heavily on Tai, on just Tai. Like, within the time that they've been split up, we could have focused on not only Tai, not only Sora, who joined Tai, but we could have focused on at least two other kids as well. and it's ridiculous. Like I get not focused on Hikari at the moment because she's not a full member of the group yet. Plus, she's captured. Nothing's really happening with her at the moment, other than like checking in to see, oh yeah, she's still captured. They're still flying. Okay, what else would we do at this point? So that I get. But the others, it's just like you're not doing anything. You're not. And it's like, so that's my only real complaint on the series. But that's, like I said, my only real complaint. Anything else is the most minor of nitpicks. It's been so drastically overall better than the original series. Um, as I've said this before watching this series is as good as I remember the original being. And I've tried rewatching the original in both sub and dub because they have different tones in the way they're handled. The original just it doesn't hold up. Not as well as it should or could. It doesn't. It's hard to watch nowadays. The dub more so than the sub because of the outdated slang and hip talk and shit. But yeah, it's very outdated. It's hard to watch. It's cringy as hell. And overall, it's like both versions. It's like they're just not there anymore. So an updated reboot like this not only made sense, but they've made it so much better in terms of literally everything: story, characters, um, animation, voice acting, just soundtrack. Everything is better. Pacing is even better. Like the original Digimon was very, very slow paced too. Um, Actually, the original Digimon's pacing was actually all over the place. Sometimes it was really, really slow, and sometimes it's just like, oh, let's just throw everything at you at once. It was just kind of all over the place. Um, but this one has been a lot more consistent. The only time it's really been fast paced is in terms of introducing the Digivolutions. But otherwise, it's actually been pretty slow. But not too slow. Like a good balanced slow that feels right for what's going on. Um, and I don't mind the entire monster of the week kind of thing going on. That doesn't bother me. It's good. It's really good. And especially as they keep introducing the bigger elements like that connect to the war from so long ago. It's like, yeah, it's just this is what I want to see. This is what I want Digimon to be. So I'm pleased. I'm pleased as punch about this series. So I again, I don't understand at all Billy and their point of view. Like it's ridiculous. Eh, it's ridiculous. But anyways, we are just going to get this started and hope for the best with this episode. Maybe we'll get more with some other character. I don't know. Hopefully. And if not, hopefully it's at least good. Because even though Ty is so just completely unbalanced in terms of focus, like the stuff we get is still good. So, in the meantime, let's just get this going. Let's stop wasting time. So when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to a reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black and then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the episode. So, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, one now. So in the original series, Gatomon was an agent of Myotismon, sent to find the final Digidestined in order to use her for their own purposes. But along the way, Gatomon started to connect with Hikari. And with that, and even with like the help from like Wizardmon and whatnot, Gatomon ended up betraying Myotismon and turning to the side of good completely. That does not seem to be what's happening at all here. They could possibly bring that in still, but I don't think it's going to. I don't. I think they're just diverging entirely at this point. Um, Really, the only thing that's similar to the original series was the early parts of this, basically up to Devimon, and even so, a lot of that was even different. And I'm saying up to Devimon, not including the Devimon fight, because that was extremely different. Um, but even so, there was still a lot of stuff even around then that was very different. So yeah, it's just there. This is really a reboot, like heavily so, in the fact that it's changing a lot. The fact that it's completely redoing everything. It's not just showing the same stuff over again in better animation and whatnot. Um, it's actually changing things, improving on things, and telling a different story overall, which, I can kind of dig. I can dig that because, one, it feels fresh and new in a really important way. As I've said before, like I said before, that this series felt really fresh and new, but also nostalgic. And that's still the case, but it's definitely leaning more into the fresh and new part now because this is all new content at this point. Like, yeah, Millenniumon existed in Adventure 02, and again, one of the games, but, well, probably multiple games, honestly. But he was never in Adventure 01. This is a completely new addition to the storyline. I don't think Skull Knightmon was in 01 either. I don't think Skull Knightmon debuted until later on. And there have been a couple Digimon who weren't in Adventure 01, who didn't exist when Adventure 01 came out. So it's wild how divergent this series has become. It's, I guess, the best way to describe it would be saying that this is like the Full Metal Alchemist treatment. The original Adventure 01 was Full Metal Alchemist, and Adventure 2020 is Brotherhood. It starts off very similar with some differences here and there, but then it just completely diverges, and it's basically not even the same series after a certain point. It's kind of like that. And while Full Metal Alchemist and Brotherhood did this because the original series came out before the manga was finished and they just kind of made up their own stuff for it, and Brotherhood was more manga accurate. With this, it's just they're just choosing to change shit. And again, I don't have a problem with that. I think it's hell. I think it's smart. It's a good decision because, again, it makes it fresh and new for the classic fans who are coming in, and it's like, oh, we don't want to just see the same thing all over again. Um, but it also makes it much more interesting for new fans, even. Like, they haven't seen the original, they don't have anything to compare it to, but by having it be more modern and having like these higher stakes and these bigger moments, I think newer fans, like kids of today's era, will connect to this more, considering the kinds of shows that are out there nowadays. The kinds of cartoons out there have a lot more big stakes than the ones of the past. Like, Kids in my time, the ones of us who watch Digimon, we also watch stuff like Powerpuff Girls and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, there were occasionally some notable stakes in Powerpuff Girls, of course. But it's like most of the time it was just like not that big a deal. It was very much Monster of the Week and just completely separated from each other. And a lot of shows were like that back then. But nowadays you have shows like Adventure Time, Steven Universe, Ruby. You have trying to think of other stuff that's actually on like broadcast television. Star Versus, I guess, counts as well. But shows like that, that's the point, that have much higher stakes, that have much more intense action, much more like a lot more war, like legit war. And it's like this kind of stuff is like we're starting to take kids more seriously in the modern era because we've learned to understand that kids can handle shit. Kids don't need to be coddled as much as we used to coddle them. Kids can handle heavy shit, especially in their cartoons. Even if they don't understand everything going on, they can still handle it. And I think that this new Digimon is very representative of that. Like, even though this was made in Japan, it's probably the same over there. They're starting to learn that kids can handle a lot more than we have used to give them credit for. And so we're starting to kind of ease up on things and show more intense situations, show more high stakes battles in these kinds of shows. And so they're making this series. Yes, kids are the main demographic. They always have been for Digimon and Pokemon and shows like that. Um, but they're making it more intense, like this war and everything, this heavy action, all this darkness you constantly see in this series. It's like if you showed this to a kid, if you traveled back in time with this show and showed it to a kid from back then, because of how coddled kids were back then, they probably would hate this. They'd probably be absolutely terrified. But kids now would probably love this. Kids now would probably get into this and just see like this is as awesome or cool or fun. And it's just like it just shows that again, we've stopped coddling them as much. We've stopped treating them like, well, babies, and started treating them like kids. Started treating them like, oh, you can handle this. And so I kind of wanted to ramble on about that for a moment, but I really like that. I really like that this is taking such a more heavy tone to it because it just feels, for us older fans, from my perspective, it feels better written, better paced, better stakes. Just everything just feels better because of it. But even just from another perspective, it's like, yeah, these kids, it's like they're getting to be taken seriously. They're being shown this kind of content that it's like, we understand you can handle this shit. And it's like, that's awesome. I like that. But anyways, so yeah, we have Gatomon now. This is an interesting development, and they could, again, they could still do Myotismon. Because Skull Knightmon slash Dark Knightmon was basically the main villain at the moment, with because Millenniumon is still kind of in the background and just waiting. Like that's going to be the end game villain of this series, and these brain dudes are probably going to come more into play later on too. Um, but that's the end game villain. Skull Knightmon slash Dark Knightmon was the main villain of this. I guess you would call this an arc. Um, so now that he's defeated, we do need another new main villain. And they could bring in Myotismon. If they do, if they bring in Myotismon, if that's what we end up seeing next, I think it's almost guaranteed that Gatomon is going to end up being a spy at first. if this is the case, I think it's pretty much guaranteed that they are going to be bringing back that plot point. If we don't see Myotismon, then I don't think they're going to be doing that. But it has to be next, because if they try to bring in my one, there's just not as many episodes left. We're like halfway through the series. It's like at this point, they have to start getting to shit. Because if they're gonna do Myotismon, I feel would take up a lot of time, even if they're doing things very differently. And then they still have to get to Millenniumon, so they might have something between Myotismon and Millenniumon. But if they don't bring in Myotismon next as the next main villain, they're not gonna bring in Myotismon. I hope they do, but I don't know. We'll have to see. My guess and my hope would still be Myotismon, then a little break in between, and then Millenniumon, or whatever form it ends up taking this time. That's kind of what I see as how this is going to go. But yeah, the Gatomon line. The Gatomon line is easily my favorite Digimon line from the original series, and just in general. Like, I noted in my favorite Digimon of all time video that I posted a while back that Angelomon is my favorite. But Gatomon's pretty high up there too. And it's just, I've always liked the line. I've always liked it. There's really no other way to put it. No other way to think about it. And though Hikari herself wasn't my favorite chosen one in the original series, it's like I still liked her very much. And part of that was her voice actress. She was just great. She's also the voice actress of Haru in the Beastars dub. Funny enough. And though I don't like that series, she still does a good job in the voice acting department for when Haru's actually in the series. But I'm not gonna get into that. I'm not gonna rant about Beastars here. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. The final battle against Dark Knightmon, it's like Knightmon's just launching a barrage of attacks. They can't stop him. Wargreymon, Digivolve to Wargreymon, they can stop him, and they destroy him. It's like it doesn't quite feel anticlimactic, because we've already been introduced to how powerful Wargreymon is, like exceptionally powerful compared to everything else we've seen. So it doesn't feel anticlimactic, because it feels natural at this point that Wargreymon would be able to take out even Dark Knightmon that easily. But at the same time, the battle itself wasn't really anything special. It felt almost like the B plot. And that's because what it was actually focusing on this was Hikari. While this was going on, Hikari was traveling through, I guess, the inside of Skull Knightmon, as weird as that sounds, or Dark Knightmon, as weird as it sounds, and following the holy Digimon that had been calling out to her since she arrived actually even before she arrived in the digital world, kind of the one that brought her to the digital world. So it was definitely focused on that. And prior to the actual battle and stuff, like, all we really saw was like them inside the good boy, listening to a little bit of a briefing from Izzy. We got to see the they're not really aliens, but the brain dudes. And it's like, most of the episode was dedicated to the climax section. And I'm fine with that, and I'm good with that. I think that it was well handled. And we get to see Hikari expressing a lot more emotion, which I'm very glad for, because that was something like they even noted in Billiam's podcast, like that Hikari expressed very little emotion, that she didn't seem to just emote at all much. And again, I'm starting to think that that was because of how focused she was on finding out who was calling to her. She was like so intensely focused on that. She only showed emotion at a couple moments, like a big example when like she was interacting with Agumon. But that's I think because like it was Agumon, like she was new to all of that still, but then she kind of got refocused and everything back on the voice that was calling out to her, and it's like so nothing else was really going through her mind at the moment. She wasn't like really being shocked or surprised by anything because she was just so intensely focused. That's the only thing I can think of, at least. Because now, again, now we're seeing much more emotion from her in this episode. Like we've seen more emotion from her in this episode than in the entire rest of the time she's been on screen in this series so far, and it's refreshing, and that definitely is a good sign of things to come. So I can't be upset with it. um, and yeah, the brain dudes. Oh my god, that made me laugh. That was funny as fuck. Like there's certain things that it'll just it really makes me laugh. There's two things recently outside of this that really got me as well. There was this post. It was actually a memory of a post I made on, or I posted onto Facebook. I shared on Facebook rather, from like a year or two ago, and it was just like it was like this Reddit thread or something. I don't know. But it said, uh, it said what a French pig says or something like that, and underneath there's like in a larger font it said oink, but it was spelled OINQUE. And then under it like continued like what a Japanese pig says, and it said oinku. And then it said what an American pig says, and it said stop resisting because it was a joke about cops. That's what it ended up going down to. But it's like I had forgotten about that post completely. So I was going through my memories on Facebook and I saw it. The first thing I saw was the word oink spelled with the QUE. And I was, for a brief second, very confused. But then I like looked higher up on the picture and saw the what a French pig says. And for some reason, it just set me off and I lost it. It was just the funniest thing to me in that moment. And it was last night. It was like very early morning, technically. So it's like I was a bit tired. So maybe that's why, but it's still funny to me. But it just set me off. It like clicked the funny button in my brain. And the other moment, recently that really just hit me like that. Oh, what was it? I had it in my head before too. But then I started talking about that. I would have forgotten it. Shit. It was something I watched. I think. Shit. I had it. I had it in my head. I was thinking about it, but then I started talking about the Oink post, and it's like I can't remember what it was. I can't remember. Really sucks too. Oh well. But there was something else as well, and it's like just big things that made me laugh, and it's like this episode definitely adds up to that. Like prior to that, it's like okay, these guys kind of remind me of the Little Green Men, but then it's like when Dark Knightmon's defeated, they all at once in that silly like voice that's very reminiscent of the Little Green Men from Toy Story. They're like, ah, and it's like, oh my god, it was the funniest thing in that moment, and it's just like, oh, that was really good. And again, the way they said that too very much again reminded me of the Little Green Men. The claw. It very much reminded me of that. Um. Oh my god. I really wish I could remember what the other thing I found really funny lately was. I don't know. I want to say it was something while I was watching Alice in Borderland or something on Netflix because I was watching that lately. Don't you hate it when you like have something in your mind and then you just completely lose it? And the thing is, like, I know I'm going to end up thinking of it like while I'm either recording something else or doing something else later on. That's bothersome. But either way, yeah, I very much enjoyed this episode. It was a good episode. It had a lot going for it. And it just, even though it was very tie focused, like I get that this was like, okay, the save Hikari mission. Maybe now we can focus, now that Hikari's been saved, on the other kids. But we'll probably focus on Hikari now. Which, I mean, fine. I mean, at least it's someone else. Again, that's my only real complaint about this series. And it's even not really that big of a complaint because overall, I still very much enjoy the episodes we get. It's still great content. It's just that that is one thing I wish was better. But either way, tell me in the comments below what you thought of this episode of Digimon Adventure 2020. And thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.